Just a few weeks ago, I was very, very lucky enough to get to go to Japan. And of course, I made a stop at my favorite place on earth, the Tokyo Disney Resort. But I also, for the very first time in my life, went to Universal Studios Japan, located in Osaka. And while I probably was mostly there to relive my childhood on the Jaws ride, that's right, they still have it, and it's exactly how you remember it, all you Florida kids. But while I was there, I of course wanted to check out Super Nintendo World, which I think it's been the envy of the entire theme park world for the last year, while those of us outside of Japan have not been able to travel there, waiting anxiously to see this. I know myself, probably like all of you watching, grew up with the Nintendo in my life. It was instantly a thing. From the moment I was born, there was an NES sitting in the house, and then obviously through my life, Super Nintendo, my personal favorite, the N64, my favorite Christmas gift I ever got. GameCube and all these systems I've had all my life. So very excited to go see Super Nintendo World. And for the first time on this channel, we've gotten to do this a lot on the WDWNT channel, but because, I mean, I know it's not exactly new, it's been open for a year in Japan, but it's new to those of us outside of the country. So with that being said, we're gonna do something we do on the other channel quite a bit when something new opens, and that is an honest review. So now, without any further ado, here's Tom's honest review of Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Japan. Okay, so when we arrived at the park, we knew this was, of course, in an ideal world, I probably would have done Jaws first, but I also understand that Jaws is probably not the ride you need to rope drop because it's been there since the park opened in 2001. And obviously Super Nintendo World's still very new, and the land closes at capacity pretty much every day. And then they do sort of on the app, they do an entry system where you get a time to come back, which has become all the rage now in the theme park world is not building anything to actually accommodate the number of guests that probably want to see it the first couple of years. You just then, use an app to give them admittance when you feel like you can handle the crowds. We immediately went straight there, and it is by Jaws. In fact, what's funny is as they've added stuff to the park, they've left Jaws alone, which Florida could not. They decided that was not an option. But they're a little landlocked in Osaka, and so the decision was they've expanded sort of route things around Jaws to a rather large bit of expansion pad that's back there. And so when they built the Wizarding World of Harry Potter several years ago on the right side of Amity, there is sort of this Stonehenge. I'm not good with Harry Potter stuff. I'm sure someone in the comments is going to correct me on this. I'm better with my Nintendo stuff. There's sort of this Stonehenge-looking area that acts as like the entry portal, and then you walk through a big, really long walkway through sort of a forest before you get back to Hogsmeade, which is behind the Jaws ride. On the other side behind the Jaws ride is Super Nintendo World. So they've done kind of the same thing where there is this really long winding path that goes all the way up to the land. This won't be a thing at all the other versions. So in Hollywood, I think the warp pipe is pretty close to Transformers. There's no big long transition. And obviously they're building Epic Universe from scratch in Florida. So they'll have the ability again to not have to build some real long pathway out to the land. And then I don't exactly know what the Singapore plans are at this point, but I don't think they include a winding path either. So they've got this long gray winding path that goes, again, past the Jaws ride. So the whole, understand, my excitement again, primarily at this visit was to see Jaws again, and then second would be Super Nintendo World. And so as we're going up this long gray walkway, it's along the finale of Jaws, and so you could hear the skipper shooting at the shark and the explosions and everything. And so I got very excited. But then I also got excited as that dissipated. I walk up this pathway you see in the ground. There are coins embedded in the ground and also dates, which mark all of the significant Mario releases through history. I think everything from the beginning up into even Odyssey, and then past Odyssey is the opening of the land, which is denoted by the last markers on the ground, which then you arrive at this big courtyard, which is the entrance to Super Nintendo World, where there's a warp pipe photo op, which is very popular in Japan, and I'm sure will be very popular at all of them. It always had a really long line, and then a big warp pipe that goes actually into the land, which all of these, it's a really interesting concept, and I think it's kind of the thing I wondered why a lot of other immersive lands never did it for the sake of sightlines, is where you've boxed the land in. So you go through this pipe, which allows you to go through the barrier into what is essentially, it's sealed off. It's fenced off from the rest of the park with these big green rolling hills. That being said, there's a moment or two where in some real deep pockets of the land, you could see stuff outside. But for the most part, the sightlines are gorgeous. And that's the first big takeaway is, I think one of the biggest wows of my entire theme park going life was emerging through the pipe, coming out of Peach's Castle, and this land is completely encircling you. There's nothing breaking that immersion, and then everything's in motion. There's piranha plants chomping, and Koopas walking around, and there's Goombas walking around, and coins are spinning, and Yoshi's walking around a tree, and there's all this motion, the clouds going back and forth. It's really amazing the first time. Now, I don't know what the reveal is going to look. It looks like the reveal is going to be very different from park to park. From what I've seen of the aerial construction photos in Hollywood thus far, it looks like you actually enter so Peach's Castle's on the bottom level, and then Bowser's Castle is elevated. In this land, you're actually starting on the top level, essentially. So you come out on the upper floor. So it's kind of amazing. It opens not just above, but also below as you walk out to the promenade. There's this whole sunken area that has the entrance to Yoshi and a snack stand down there, and the 1-Up Factory store. And I know the layout is very different in Hollywood from the aerial. Again, they don't even have the Yoshi ride. But then Florida will have both of those attractions. So I assume the Florida layout will be similar, but I don't know. In Japan, you could get away more with this tiered land, right? Because in the US parks, you see a lot of wheelchairs, you see a lot of ECVs, and you see a lot of strollers. There is a lot of that in US theme parks. In Japan, obviously you see strollers, not a ton of them, but still a good number. Wheelchairs and ECVs, they're a rarity. You see 1 or 2 a day. And so for access reasons in the US, I can't imagine they really want to have that much on different levels, because that would require you to build a lot of elevators. That being said, in the Osaka land, there's still 2 elevators. I mean, they're in kind of far-flung corners, but not a lot of people are using them. So I still think there were a number of crowd flow problems in the land in Osaka, so I kind of hope it's getting heavily retooled for the others. Maybe they realize that in time, at least for Epic Universe. And I think for Hollywood, they always had a very different idea because of how landlocked that plot really is, and the fact that they are already only doing the 1 ride there with no plans of expansion. But nonetheless, visually, the land is incredible. It is. There's very few lands. I remember walking into Pandora the first time and seeing the floating mountains. I remember vividly the first time going into Diagon Alley and seeing Gringotts with the dragon and blowing fire. There's a few lands where you never forget that first vista, and in recent years, Cars Land and Galaxy's Edge and those sorts of things. But this is one of those for sure. Universal has nailed scenic design in theme parks. They from the moment, I think pretty much from the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, the first one, onward through all the bigger projects, they've really nailed scenic design. And some of that's when they're pressured, right? Because Potter and Nintendo are both really beautiful lands. And then you see sometimes with the Universal-owned properties, I think sometimes it feels kind of like they don't try as hard. Maybe there's not enough people pressuring creative to do grander things, or the budgets maybe are just not as big. And things that come to mind like Fast and the Furious Supercharged, and why am I blanking? The Jimmy Fallon ride. I'm blanking on the name of the Jimmy Fallon ride. Race Through New York with Jimmy Fallon. There you go. Although I will say, like, as much as I dislike Race Through New York, the entry building and the queue are really pretty. And that's what Universal's been really great at the last 10 years or so, I think, is they've gotten just as good as Disney as creating themed environments. And so even though sometimes I don't think the rides are great, like Gringotts has its issues. It's not one of my favorite attractions, but you can't deny that that land and that queue are absolutely phenomenal. They're gorgeous. And that's the first takeaway, and the biggest takeaway I think from Super Nintendo World is you legitimately are stepping into the world of Super Mario. You are in the Mushroom Kingdom. It feels like you're in it, and it maybe even more so than all those other lands I've mentioned, actually makes you feel like you're in the real place, because real place, as if that is a real place somewhere. But if you were going to try, if someone tasked you with bringing the Mushroom Kingdom to life in the human world, I mean, they did it. They absolutely did it. Everything looks to scale and as crisp and clean and colorful as it looks in the games, and seeing these giant piranha plants snap at things and Koopas walk by and all of that it's actually magical. It's really fantastically done. So the other thing that kind of ties into that is the power-up bands. So what they've done is sort of in the vein of Magic Band. They have this band you can wear, and they have 6 different designs with different characters on them. And the point of the band is you can collect coins and achieve things. You can make achievements, reach achievements. I'll find the words at some point. You can unlock it. I didn't want to say unlock. I know unlock achievements, but they're really just stickers in the app. So I really don't want to say you're unlocking something. I guess it's a digital reward of sorts. You can unlock these achievements, these stamps. You have like this big stamp book in the app. And as you go along, you can get all these stamps and fill the book. And there are a lot of achievements for a lot of weird little things. So it will take you, even if you visit super regularly, it is going to take you a long time, which is great. It's super repeatable. And so there are a number of, using this new age Magic Band, you can go around the land and do all sorts of different activities. Number one, all the coin blocks and brick blocks that are within reach have a little rubber thing under them, which you can smash and it'll interact, and your band will know that you're collecting coins or whatever you're doing, and it'll show up in your app, which is great. But then there are these activities that sometimes have a bit of a queue because, again, there's only so many of them and the land is very popular. And there's all these different little activities you can do, which then some of them eventually lead to you being able to fight Bowser Jr. in what is, I would call the third attraction of the land. Even watching Spencer's videos a year ago, which we have the whole, if you just want to watch the experiences and not listen to me, talk about them for an hour, you could just go watch them. We have everything in the land recorded and here on the channel. But even watching Spencer's experience, like in person, it felt way more like an attraction. And I think it was, what I would say is it's everything I ever really wanted that type of interactive experience to be. I think Disney came out of the gate with Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom almost 10 years ago, and it was like, all right, this is cool, but it is just screens. It's kind of neat. And then Universal did the wand experience in the Harry Potter land, which I thought was a vast improvement on the concept, which is pay to play, but I think it was always rewarding. I loved seeing physical. There were a couple screen effects, but I loved watching physical, tangible things move around as you wave a wand. It's magical, for lack of another word. It's a magical experience. And then Disney did one of a very similar vein. They did the Pirates Adventure game at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, where, again, physical things happen, where, a boat like blows up and treasure raises out of the water and all these things. And that I think is a great reward for guests. I think that's what guests want out of all this wearable tech. I think they want to interact and actually change the world around them. They don't want to just simply interact with it. They want that interaction to lead to some sort of physical change in the landscape. I think that's a great reward for people. I think mentally that's the threshold. I think with Sorcerers, people kind of got bummed with Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom that nothing physically around them changed. And so the reward didn't feel great for playing the game other than you got a couple of cards to bring home. And I think in the case of Pirates Adventure and the Harry Potter wand stuff, you got that reward. The reward was, oh, look at that cool thing that happened. I did that. That's really cool. And you get that, and I think it's best form to date in Super Nintendo world, in that not only do you play these games, but there are real big physical props interacting with you as you play the games. And then on top of that, you then have sort of that Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom reward where there is a real game aspect where you're collecting things, you're collecting achievements and coins. So it's taking what everyone liked about Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom and what everyone liked about the Wand experience and Pirate's Adventure, bringing them all together in one. And I think, again, the best version of that has existed. So you go and play, I played the game where you have to hit the alarm clocks and put the giant piranha plant back to sleep, very much like the whole lullaby thing in Super Mario 64. We have to tiptoe by and not wake them up. This is about making sure the giant scary piranha plant goes back. And he's magnificent. What a tremendous moving figure. He's so cool. He's snoring, and then when he wakes up and gets all grumpy, it's that for me was the coolest thing in the whole land, was that little alarm clock game. But all of that stuff is really cool. There's the one where you have to hit the POW block and send the Koopa shell up to hit the Koopa. And there's the one where you have to fight there's the rolling walkway and you're battling with the Goomba. Those are great. And there's cool screen stuff too, right? You get to do the sort of lottery game where you roll the the slot machine for power-ups, which was great. And there's all sorts of little stuff like that. And then the underground experience where you fight the bomb was I love the idea of you walk through a tunnel and it's like a bomb has blown up and damaged you, and so you shrink to the smaller size, and they send you through an enlarged room at that point to simulate that you are small Mario when he doesn't have a mushroom to get bigger. And then you achieve the game and you get the mushroom and you grow back to the regular size. And it's done very well. So all in all, I think the highlights of the land are the land itself and the power-up band games. I think that is everything a Nintendo fan or Super Mario fan ever wanted that to be. And for theme park people who love that interactive stuff, again, the best form of it you've seen to date. So big ups to the power. And I think it's, I know it's an upcharge. I know you got to buy like a $40 band. But I think it's worth it. I think it's fun. And again, the band's going to come in use in everything you do in the land, not just these interactive things. You're going to use it on Mario Kart and even on the Yoshi ride. Everything's interactive. So Nintendo wanted a big play factor in everything you do in the whole land. Even in the queue of the restaurant, in the Toad Cafe or Canopio Cafe, as it's known in Japan, even in that queue, there's a whole little game that you play where you get to pick either the big prize box or the small prize box, and you see what you get rewarded with. So big ups to that. I think they nailed that experience. But now we got to talk about what probably everyone wants to know, which are the rides. It's a theme park. Everyone wants to talk about rides. Personally, I like the interactive stuff. I like to see new things happen and thinking outside the box. But in some ways, the Mario Kart attraction was an attempt outside of the box. So first and foremost, when we first ran into the land, obviously the first thing we did was get in line for Mario Kart. And that whole, those first 20, 30 minutes in the land will stick with me forever. Because as I talked about before, like obviously seeing the land and everything moving was phenomenal. But then it doesn't stop at that point. There are no real breaks in the immersion. As far as design and how thematic the land is, it is hard to tell you're in a theme park in most cases. You don't see all the lighting in most cases really well hidden. It's Galaxy's Edge level where they've really, and Pandora, where they've gone out of their way to make sure this doesn't feel like you're in a theme park. It does feel like you're in the place we've sent you to. And the Mario Kart queue is one of the best queues I have ever seen. The whole lead up, go up a staircase and there's this giant Bowser statue. And then it's not the most heavily themed room, but it's so accurate. There's this room with a production truck for MKTV, which of course is the in the story of the games is how the races are being broadcast. So it's a giant TV production truck with a satellite, and they've got road cases and all sorts of stuff that you'd find. And we have a real studio here at WDWNT Celebration, and it was fun for me to see all the stuff that we use in a real studio was represented in this cartoony Mario version there. So I don't know if maybe it won't speak to the average guest as much, but it spoke to me, and I really thought it was very, very cute. And I love coming from the truck, you could hear all the noises from the races. You hear like the finish line noise and shells shooting off and the start noises and all of that fun stuff. But then the queue goes on, and you go into, I guess it's Bowser's, you're in Bowser's castle, so it's his study or his office or whatever it might be. And it is, this room is beautifully themed. Big giant models and all sorts of propping, and all the books have real fun names on them, and there's cute little screen effects throughout. It is one of the coolest queue rooms I've seen in any attraction on Earth. And that continues on with some really cool stuff. There's like the factory where Bowser builds all his weaponry, and some of the villains, the Bob-ombs and all the mechanical villains, not the organic ones like the Koopas and the Goombas. He doesn't make those. Those are real creatures, but all these wind-up creatures that he builds. You go through that factory, and eventually you get to a pre-show experience, which is very much out of the game. A lot of screens and them explaining what the experience will be like, and that you have to wear this big Mario headset, and how you're going to put the glasses on, and how you score. And there's a lot to learn. There is a big learning curve with this game. And obviously, in Japan, I don't speak the language. So everything had English subtitles, though. So I was not getting any less information than the guests around me. And also had Spencer with me, who's been on the ride, I don't know, somewhere in the 20s, 30s, 40s times. He's been on it. And so he told me everything he thought I should know about the Mario Kart ride. And so go down the steps, and we go into the load area, also absolutely gorgeous. And then the vehicles are really cool. They're the big Mario Karts that seat 4 guests. And you get in, and you got to pull the restraint down, and you got to tap your band on the center of the steering wheel, so you make sure that it knows you're there, and you can get all your achievements for the ride. And you got to put the visor. So after the pre-show, they give you the Mario cap, which I think works well enough. You put it on, and there's a twisty device in the back that tightens or loosens it. And it's easy enough to get it situated. I will tell you this, my tip is to make sure there's a rubber part underneath the brim that makes it sit comfortably on your forehead. What worked really well for me is to make sure that rubber part is literally on your eyebrows, because otherwise the augmented reality is not going to align in places where it's easy for you to view. It was my experience. So wear that hat as far down in the front as you can to make sure you see things as properly as you can. And so it's not uncomfortable. And honestly, the visor part that you attach in the vehicle is not heavy to the point of being uncomfortable. I think the process works out. Some guests are still going to have problems with it. It's probably doing better in Japan than it's going to do in the US as far as the loading procedures and making sure people understand how they're supposed to wear stuff. But I think it'll be okay. I think they did the best they could with getting people acquainted with and loaded with all the technology and equipment. And so at this point, you're on the ride, and they do sort of there's a weird little training segment at the beginning that doesn't really necessarily emulate the rest of the ride, where these flat Super Nintendo versions of the Mario Kart characters come by, and you could start trying out shooting. It does a good job teaching you how to shoot the weaponry. So the weaponry is all based on, you have triggers on the steering wheel. But otherwise, your aiming is all controlled by pointing your head. So it doesn't matter where the vehicle is pointed, it matters where your face is pointed. So wherever the middle of that visor is your shooting. So if Bowser's over here, even if the cart is pointed over here, you better look over there and shoot like this, and which is not necessarily intuitive. I think it's going to take at least one ride to get used to, which again, this ride is going to be very popular everywhere it is, right? And for there to be a learning curve that really you don't necessarily feel like you've got it down pat until after your first ride, maybe even after 2 rides, is asking a lot of guests. And I think that's going to lead to bad reviews because people are going to be upset that they didn't really necessarily fully understand how it worked. Like even if you explaining how it works and then people actually trying out are 2 different things. To give you a Nintendo analogy, right? Think about the Nintendo Wii. I remember they would show you instructions on screen of how to play a game, but how, like the instructions would be nice and clear, but then once you actually go to play it, it could feel very different from what the instructions looked like. And that's how I feel in Mario Kart, where I saw the instructions, I was like, this seems pretty straightforward. But then once I'm actually doing it myself, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's not quite what I thought that was going to be. Or the aiming's a little different than I thought it would be. Or you didn't make it clear that when I turn, I need to hold the steering wheel, not just like give it a click that direction, which will trigger a noise if you've done something right. But you do actually have to hold it in that direction when it tells you to turn. Those are the 2 activities also that you have to do on the ride. There's turning or drifting and shooting. That's it. You're not driving the car. Otherwise, there's 4 of you in the car, and the car is going where the car is going. It is a slow speed dark ride with augmented reality goggles on your face. That is what Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge is, or in this case in Japan, Koopa's Challenge. That's basically what it is. So imagine riding like Peter Pan's Flight with augmented reality, or in the case of Universal, Cat in the Hat with augmented reality goggles. I don't know what I was expecting the augmented reality to look like. Obviously, we've had the video up for a year, and I've watched the video a couple times. And I was like, oh, it doesn't look great on the video, but also Spencer's trying to shoot inside of augmented reality goggles with a cell phone, which is not easy, mind you. And I figure like it's going to look wonky at times for sure. The video is more accurate to the real ride experience than I was hoping it would be. So what they've done is, again, Universal has gotten so good at scenic design. All of the sets along the way, all the scenes along the way in the ride are gorgeous. You will never get to appreciate that because with the AR goggles, I think you lose sense of what is actually there and what isn't, or at the very least, the augmented reality is so distracting that you don't get to enjoy the actual ride. There's so much for you to do and so much for you to try to see correctly that it is hard to enjoy the ride itself. I would say it's like overcomplicated Men in Black or Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters or Space Ranger Spin or Toy Story Mania. It's a really overcomplicated version of those, which is, I'm not sure what anyone wanted a Mario Kart ride to be. I think it's one of those cases where I think Nintendo got so hung up on the fact of Universal, they really need a ride where people can earn points and shoot, and they have to be able to actually shoot things. And obviously for capacity, we can't put people in single rider carts. I think it got to the point where it gets so far away from what Mario Kart is that the ride is, I would dare say it's a failure. It's an absolute failure. The positive, I would say, is I think with some money, I think it's easily fixable. I think you would just need to develop some animatronics or even just moving figures of characters and put them into those scenes where you've built these beautiful sets already. And you could have a really great dark ride. It's not, at that point, I think, an e-ticket spectacular. It's not currently an e-ticket spectacular, but it's going to be marketed as one. And for a lot of guests, it's going to be because it's Mario Kart, right? For me, that's my favorite Nintendo game. I've loved Mario Kart my whole life. I'll never forget the first time I played that on Super Nintendo. We just got lost in that game for hours and hours, and hours of it on every other system after that. And I was so giddy in that queue, and Spencer and my significant other who were there will tell you, every detail, that's amazing, that's cool. I was, as the kids would say, I was hyped. I was so hyped to get into that car. And then once the augmented reality started at the starting line, and I'm not really seeing the whole image, and I'm wearing it correctly, mind you, it's just the frame, the width of the vision is the width of the vision. And so where you're looking, you see the characters clearly, but characters cut in half and stuff as you look around. So there was this moment of like instant disappointment at that moment when the AR stuff started, of where it's like, oh, wow. And then it's really bright. And so it's super distracting from the normally lit real world backdrops that you're driving by, which is a shame. So the augmented reality not only comes off as a hokey gimmick, it ruins what is a really beautifully designed dark ride that's behind the goggles. So I know what you're saying. Well, just take the goggles off. I tried that, got yelled at. I don't know if it'll be different in the US if people just be able to do that. No one will care that they took the goggles off. Japan is very rule oriented. We found in our visits, they're very strict with things. Photography on rides, way stricter there. They don't want you to have your phones or anything out on almost anything in any park, even really slow moving things where it'd be really hard to lose something. They're very grumpy about it. Again, so being safety oriented, I don't know, they were afraid. Even though the ride's moving 2 miles an hour, somehow I'm gonna drop the headset, which is, by the way, the visor, which is attached to a long cord that's hooked to the vehicle. But I guess there might be a way where if you dropped it off the side, it would hang off enough to shut down the ride. It's possible, I guess. But yeah, I think the same thing happened. Web Slingers, a Spider-Man adventure, a California adventure, and in Paris was the same thing, where I think you got so caught up in the fact that technology would allow you to do something that you didn't think about the idea that people came to the park to go into the world for real. Like at home, they can turn on Mario Kart and play that game. And the same with Spider-Man, like at home, they can go home and they can watch that movie. But we go to these places to be fully immersed, to go into the world, to feel like we're a part of it. And so in Web Slingers, because it's all screens and you're shooting webs on screens, it's not the most immersive ride. It still makes it the second best Spider-Man ride ever built, still, to the Universal ride, which, despite having screens, is so amazing a ride that it doesn't matter. They did such a great job. It's so immersive beyond the screens, and so innovative. And Mario Kart, I feel the same way, where it's the land. I felt so immersed in the world. Like I finally had been able to step into this thing I had grown up with and grown to love through 25, 30 years of my life. I was finally in that place. And then I put on those AR goggles and that all melted away. And it became, I'm just playing the video game that I had at home. And even then, it's not as fun as the video game I had at home because it has all these limitations. At that point, maybe it would have been better as a simulator. If that's really what Nintendo wanted, maybe the ride was better off as a simulator and leave it at that and not building a bunch of ride scenes. But it's one of the more disappointing attraction experiences of my entire theme park life. I felt the same in 1999 when I rode Jurassic Park River Adventure for the first time. I was so disappointed because there were so many years of hype, Jurassic Park being one of my favorite movies ever. So many years of hype, and we get off that ride, and I just remember thinking, like, the animatronics, like the dinosaurs didn't look good. And that dinosaur ride that opened at Animal Kingdom the year before was actually a lot more fun and better. And so it was this big disappointment with Mario Kart. I don't know how they could have lived up to all the hype and all the expectations we have as people that have spent so many hours playing that game. I don't know that a slow-moving dark ride with animatronics would have done it. I don't know that a fast-moving ride that was more like a thrill ride would have made everyone happy either. I don't know that I have the solution. All I know for sure is that the Mario Kart ride that they built and in the way it operates is not particularly fun, not particularly good. Sadly, that's what I have to say about Mario Kart. Yeah, but then it's super happy again when you exit because there's this really cool themed store that has amazing Mario Kart merchandise. So it's redeems it a little bit. We'll talk about merchandise and food and all that later. Let's talk about the other ride. Let's talk about Yoshi's Adventure, which in Japan is entered from the bottom floor of the land. And it has a really big queue. It's not as stunning a queue as Mario Kart, but nonetheless, it does. I think it properly captures the Yoshi video games, where it's sort of that. I won't say more of a less. It's that softer art style, the sort of sketch style. Things look like they're colored sort of haphazardly by a child, maybe. That whole aesthetic is very much present from the Yoshi games. This thing averages, like most days we saw it anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes more. And you go around, you go up the tree, and you get to the load area. It's continuously loading. It's an Omni-Mover ride. And everyone gets into a Yoshi, which has this really convoluted restraint system, which I have to report it does appear to be the same restraint system that Secret Life of Pets is using in Hollywood, which has been a problem. I know larger guests, despite the fact that ride doesn't leave the ground, it has nothing intense about it. It has this really restrictive restraint system that is not allowing some larger guests to ride. And we're talking about not necessarily guests of extreme proportions, but overweight guests for sure. I'm one of those. I get it. We're talking about people, not necessarily even people of extreme body sizes, but even just sort of, slightly larger than average body sizes have had some issues with the restraint system. And I think in the case of Yoshi, Mario Kart seems like it's going to have, I think it's slightly more accepting that restraint system, but still, even then, they were sort of measuring me to make sure I made it. I made it on that in Yoshi just fine, but there's in America there's a lot of people bigger than me, and I think we're gonna have some interesting problems here. And then not even for people that are overweight, just taller people. I know once you get past my height, sometimes depending on the length of your legs, rides become challenging. I know Tron Light Cycle Run in Shanghai has had problems, the taller people are. And I think Mario Kart and Yoshi and Secret Life of Pets are all going to be in that group too, where if you're 6'6" or taller and your legs are long, your knees may not go down enough to let that restraint properly sit. So we'll see what happens. But nonetheless, the Yoshi ride is incredibly short, and I'd call it's kind of like the People Mover or the High in the Sky Swoosh Trolley train ride of the land, but much shorter than either of those. And yeah, it's just not, it's a really great, again, I love the land. So going out into the land on this Yoshi was a cute experience. We offered these great views. You go into this one room, there's one indoor scene that I would simply explain as like a really beautiful store window display. We're talking like Saks Fifth Avenue Christmas. So like there's money spent on it. But in the end, it's kind of just like a window display in that everyone has very limited movement. So Yoshi's got like just a couple of feet of head movement, and it just goes back and forth. There's a lot of that going on in that room. Although Poochie is there, which made the ride for me. The fact that there was a fully sculpted Poochie was one of the highlights of the day for sure. And there is this interactive element so there is a console in front of you with 3 colored Yoshi eggs. And when you find the Yoshi eggs on the ride, you have to hit that. And again, if you did your band correctly, then you'll collect your stamps and coins for having spotted the eggs. And there's some really cute moments, but it is way too short. And like at that length, it can't have a 45, 60 hour, 15-minute wait. It's not reasonable. I think even families with kids are going to come off that a little disappointed by the length of the ride. Not necessarily so much the quality, but the length of the ride is just too short. It needs to be at least like another minute longer, I think, if it's going to pose. And I think that's how people feel about Peter Pan's Flight. Like, I love Peter Pan's Flight. I don't want to wait 60 minutes for that. Even with kids, like, the kids get pretty restless in the queue, and then for it to be just that at the end of it, I think. It's like people are willing to put up with 3 or 4 hour waits for the first time they ride something that's just really amazing and is this thing you're going to talk about for forever, right? So the first time you went on Hagrid's or Flight of Passage or Velocicoaster or whatever, if you waited a long time for those, I think it's okay because the ride experience felt long enough and special enough to be like, wow, that was worth the wait. That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Yoshi isn't even in that realm. It's a one of the most basic dark rides I've seen from the big two theme parks. And I'm wonder if it was just like, we need the capacity, we should just build this little dark ride so there's something else to do in the land. I don't really know what the story was, or it's something without I think there is a height requirement anyway. Something that smaller kids might do, or people that won't do Mario Kart, which again, Mario Kart isn't a thrill ride, so I don't know who that necessarily includes. I don't know what the thinking was on making this ride. It's a weird one. It was a weird decision and a really strange execution. Like again, the land is cool. It's just, I don't need to go see it for, a minute. Go outside really slow, go into this one room, turn around, and you're back in the station. It is, I remember my significant other, as we were going back in, was like, that's it? That's the ride? I go, yeah, it's over. She's like, I thought it was going to go around the whole land, which if it did, honestly, like that would be amazing. And because it's an Omni mover, you just continually load. So you can make that ride longer, and the capacity, the quickness at which you could load people wouldn't change. You just needed to build more track around more of the land. And I think that would have made it something, I think it could have gone from really forgettable to super fantastic without really changing necessarily the quality of the ride, just making it longer, making people feel like they got more bang for their buck on their wait time. And I don't know, it's Yoshi. I don't know that wait time's ever really going to be lower than 30 or 45, even years down the road. I'd be very, very surprised. I mean, those are timeless characters. People love them. And people are going to be, oh, Yoshi ride, cool, let's go on it. Which is how I felt. So, yeah, this is kind of the problem I've had with Universal in more recent years. And Velocicoaster and Hagrid's aside, because both of those are absolutely phenomenal. I think any other ride they've tried, I always just sort of feel like they fell short of the goal. I feel like they have, again, mastered the environments. The environments are as beautiful, and in some cases more beautiful, than what Walt Disney Imagineering has been able to achieve the last several years. And then I think when it gets to the rides themselves, they sometimes just don't know how to cross that finish line. And I know the word on the street is Nintendo kind of got in the way on these projects with what they in particular wanted, as opposed to Harry Potter, where I think the first time around it was, we have the rights to this Kuka arm ride technology. Wouldn't that be cool? And J.K. Rowling just like, yeah, sure. And then, in this case, I think Miyamoto and the gang were probably more involved and way more interested in what the ride would be and sort of pushing some newer, in the case of Mario Kart, pushing some newer technology. And I don't think it worked to their advantage. So this is why I'm really excited about so there's a Donkey Kong roller coaster that's coming that is in both Osaka and also going to be in Epic Universe. And I am beyond excited for that because number one, you can't really meddle with that. You're not going to make people wear devices or do a whole bunch of interactive things on a roller coaster. And also from what I've seen of it already, it's been in development for almost a decade already. From what I've seen of it, just looks super fun. And so I think Donkey Kong is going to end up being the hit of the two Super Nintendo worlds it's in. And the other two rides are just I think people are going to be a little disappointed. Don't get me wrong, I think some people are going to think it's very cool and like it. I don't think it's going to be like an ultra failure to the point where people don't ride it. I just think it's going to be less than what people maybe thought it was going to be. Where I think Fast and the Furious, I know I'm not putting it in the same class as Fast and the Furious Supercharged, but I think in the case of Fast and Furious Supercharged, I think guests came in with a very particular idea of what a Fast and the Furious ride would be. And in many cases, number one, that it would indeed be fast. And then that ride is not fast. It's the opposite of fast. It's very slow. And people were like, that's not what I expected. That's a bad ride. And I think in some cases with Mario Kart and Yoshi, there might be some of that get off the ride and, that's not what I thought it was going to be. And Star Wars Galaxy's Edge suffered a bit of that too, where I think the Millennium Falcon ride, I think people came off of that and went, that's not what I thought a Millennium Falcon ride would be, because I think people realized their thought of a ride on the Millennium Falcon was, I get to ride alongside Han Solo and Chewbacca and go on an adventure, as opposed to I'm the pilot and I'm doing everything and there's no one else on board, which is not what people wanted. And there's some of that in the land in Galaxy's Edge too, where it's not what people wanted. But thankfully, in the case of Super Nintendo World, the land itself, the interactive stuff, and I think even the shopping and the restaurants are pretty much what people wanted. So there are a lot of redeeming factors about Super Nintendo World. Sadly, they're not the rides, which, for better or for worse, is a really important part of what a theme park land is. Let's talk about food. I'm going to go real quick on this because I know this isn't really going to apply to other parts of the world, because I know they're going to change a lot of the food location to location. But number one, there is a popcorn kiosk in the hillside just outside of Bowser's Challenge, Mario Kart, which had mushroom cream popcorn. It was amazing. I didn't get to try the other flavor, but it was amazing. Of course, we've already showed here on the channel all the souvenirs. There's the popcorn bucket that looks like the Superstar, and there's the Mario Kart one, and there's the Fire Flower sipper, really cool souvenir sippers and popcorn buckets and such. And then a Canopio Cafe, the Toad Cafe, was also a highlight. I really, really loved the food. I had a sort of a pizza soup, which came in a mushroom bowl where the top of the mushroom was this bread that was baked on top, and then you'd break through the bread, and then there was cheese and meat and everything mixed in, so it was like a pizza soup, and I thought that was great. And the other thing I really loved was they had a mushroom soup that was to die for, and it came in a big plastic mushroom, and you take the lid off, and it's this delicious mushroom soup. And then the first day we went, I got to have my cake. For those of you who don't know, the end of Super Mario 64, to thank you for saving her life and the entirety of the Mushroom Kingdom, Peach shows her gratitude by baking a cake, which seems somewhat uneven of a reward to what Mario has gone and done, fighting through, all these different worlds to save her life. And again, the entire kingdom, he gets a cake in return. But nonetheless, it's nice that she thanked him in some way. You get this cake, the strawberry and cream cake. It was delicious. One of the things that did live up to my expectations was I remember beating that game and seeing that cake, and the fact that you could order that cake and it comes on this shiny silver tray was such a cool experience. It's what you want. You want to go live out these things that you saw in your childhood in these games that you played. And that's when Super Nintendo World really succeeds in those moments. And then also there's the Yoshi Snack Island where we had that shell. I don't even remember what the thing was called, but there's a green shell filled with stuff that was pretty good, and there were some fruit lassi drinks that were really enjoyable. So food-wise, I don't know how much of it's going to carry over to the U.S. parks. I assume a lot of the food will be different, so I don't want to linger on it. But Spencer does have video reviews where he tries everything in the land. So if you're going to go out to Osaka and see the land there, make sure you check out Spencer's video reviews here where he talks through every single item. I only had a couple of things. We weren't there for very long. And then last but not least, I want to talk about the merchandise, because another place they really succeeded was the merchandise. So many really cool and thoughtful and unique souvenirs. And again, I'm not going to talk about them at length because there are several unboxing videos we've done on the WDWNT channel where it's mixed in with my Tokyo Disney stuff, where we opened all sorts of Super Nintendo World merchandise. There's also a full tour of the 1UP Factory store here on the channel where he goes through the store and talks through everything. But man, that store goes on forever and ever. It's so big. And there's so much stuff, and all of it is really cool. The merchandise team did a phenomenal job. So food, merchandise, The land itself in design and all the power-up band activities are all phenomenal, and in some ways change the game. And the rides are in total, I will say the only weak point, because I think design-wise the land layout is weird. And when it was crowded in Osaka, it was hard to get around that land, and a lot of up the stairs and down the stairs and lines for the little power-up band experiences spilling out into main paths because there wasn't really queue space built for them. Design-wise, they made some mistakes that affect them operationally, but the real big mistakes are, I think, the two rides. I think the two rides are below expectations. But you know what they say, everything can't be absolutely perfect, right? So, yeah, I wish, and I know some people, he hates everything, blah, blah, blah. I really went in trying, I wanted to love this because, again, lifelong Nintendo fan, and Mario Kart in particular, one of, if not my favorite game of all time. And so it was just so disappointing and so sad. Just so sad. I wish I could see, I would love to see in the creative process what the other pitches were for that ride, and if there was an idea that maybe was stronger and more akin to what maybe everyone would have expected of Mario Kart. But nonetheless, you will, again, if you're a lifelong Nintendo fan, you will be so enthused with all of the environment and everything going on around you that I can't imagine you won't have a good time in any of the Super Nintendo worlds. But maybe just bring your expectations down a peg for Mario Kart and Yoshi. If they're up here, bring them about here. Well, that's it for our honest review of Super Nintendo World. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe for more great content. I'm also going to do a video. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear more about Universal Studios Japan from a first-timer perspective. I'd be happy to talk more about my trip and experiencing Jaws and the Flying Dinosaur and all the unique attractions as well that are out there at Universal Studios Japan. So thanks for watching. We'll see you real soon. Go collect some coins, kids.